So, as this article from Fee Foundation for Economic Education says, $15 minimum wage laws are wiping out jobs in New York and Illinois. And as the article goes into, by advocating minimum wage hikes, people get to signal their own political virtue at the expense of other people's jobs. Ain't that the truth? Now, let's get to the article itself. As the article goes into, big minimum wage hikes wipe out a lot of jobs. Illinois recently enacted a $15 minimum wage, a large increase in the minimum wage that will be phased in over several years. And businesses are already announcing plans to close up, move out of the state, or curb their expansion in the state. The Daily Gazette and Sauk Valley Media provide the example of Hoppers Poppers. Whatever that means, I must be missing something. As they say, after a little more than 2 years downtown, Hoppers Poppers, the business, and the building it's in are being put up for sale, the owner said. Ryan Hopper also closed his Sycamore shop this week, citing Governor J.B. Pritzker's approval of a statewide $15 minimum wage increase. 3 months ago, he and his wife, Stephanie, were considering adding a third location in Roscoe, which would have brought him closer to his 5-location goal. But he said the minimum wage hike and Illinois' notoriously high property taxes solidify the decision for his family to continue their business ventures outside Illinois. It's absolutely ridiculous. We'll go into this a bit more in a moment. But anyway, as it goes on to say, jobs are being lost in New York, too. New York City experienced its worst decline in restaurant jobs since 9/11 after a $15 minimum wage there was enacted. The city saw its sharpest fall in restaurant employment in nearly 20 years. Its 40% increase in the minimum wage was phased in over a 2-year period, but substantial job losses are already evident. As John Miltimore of the Foundation of Economic Education notes, restaurants tend to operate on famously low profit margins, typically 2 to 6%. So a 40% mandatory wage increase over a 2-year period is not trivial. Yeah, and actually, I just want to butt in for a moment there. A friend of mine who has worked in the food industry for a long time was talking about, because I was thinking a long time ago, maybe it would be interesting to open a restaurant. And he's like, don't do it. I've been in the food industry most of my life. Bad idea. Restaurants do not make money. And especially in places where there's crazy minimum wages. But anyway, let's get on to more here. As it says, in response to the minimum wage hikes, New York City restaurants did what businesses tend to do when labor costs rise. They increase prices and reduce labor costs. Who would have thought, or reduce labor staff and hours, same thing. For example, Lolito's, a popular restaurant on Bayard Street, recently raised its menu prices 10 to 15%, Eater New York reports. Guess what? People end up paying more for things. That's what happens when you centralize everything and raise prices and push people out of work and make people more impoverished and dependent. Anyway, let's go on. A New York City Hospitality Alliance survey also showed that 3 out of 4 full-service restaurants said they plan to reduce employee hours. Nearly half of those surveyed said they plan to eliminate some job positions in 2019. As Miltimore notes, several other states have passed or are in the process of enacting a $15 pay floor, and New Jersey recently enacted a $15 minimum wage. The increase will be phased in over several years, joining California, Massachusetts, and New York. The Maryland House of Delegates passed a $15 pay floor on February 27th. The District of Columbia and some cities such as Minneapolis and Seattle and Minneapolis also have $15 minimum wage laws. We'll get into a bit more of this in a moment, but I do want to mention real quick here the obvious, which is that when you centralize these things, when you you force these businesses to basically obey these crazy regulations and rules and legislation, what happens is that they're forced to lay off people because they can't compete. And guess who can compete? Guess who is able to compete? McDonald's, Burger King, all these other things. And now, well, we could talk about automation. And now automation isn't a bad thing. Statistically, it actually creates more jobs than it kills long term, as we've seen since the 1990s. And it also helps with mortality rates, etc. But the point is, when you regulate these things, well, McDonald's can afford to do it. They can get the self-checkouts. They can get robots handing people food. They can get robots making hamburgers and flipping hamburgers, and the less important jobs go away. That's a market. But the issue is that most restaurants cannot keep up with that, except for in certain places. Now, if you look at places, for example, like Nevada, no state income tax, very few regulations, very low taxes. They aren't forcing up the minimum wage yet. And waitressing is one of the most profitable jobs in the state. People make a fortune at it, and strippers and stuff like that. But nonetheless, huge tips. People are spending more, etc. And it's less extortion. It's more voluntary taxes, like gambling away all your money stupidly. But anyway, you get the point. We see all these businesses going under this virtue signaling of the left, saying that we need to raise minimum wages in order to help the poor. Well, no, it means less poor people have jobs. The price of living still increases. The money doesn't go as far. Costs go up. Everyone ends up paying for it equivalent, if not more, eventually. And it's just basic economics, which, speaking of basic economics, let's look at the rest of this article here. As it says, a $15 minimum wage ignores basic economics. And as it goes into, the abstract idea of a living wage is so powerful that politicians and even voters are willing to sacrifice real people in the pursuit of it. Politicians have admitted that these radical increases in the minimum wage make no economic sense, even if they make for a moralistic political soundbite. In signing California's $15 minimum wage into law, California's Jerry Brown said that economically minimum wages may not make sense, but morally, socially, and politically, they make every sense. Okay, strange quote. Voters often feel the same way. The Los Angeles Times reported that Californians strongly backed the state's minimum wage increase to $15, even though they believe the wage hike will hurt their pocketbooks and the state's economy. And high percentages of those surveyed expected negative consequences, including layoffs and business relocations to states with lower minimum wages. Almost 90% of respondents believed that prices for consumers would rise because of the wage hike. And as it continues to go on here, by advocating minimum wage hikes, people get to signal their political virtue at the expense of other people's jobs, as I mentioned earlier. 72% of economists say that a $15 minimum wage is a bad idea. And an even higher percentage says it will increase the unemployment rate. And economists at Moody's estimated that up to 160,000 jobs will be lost in California's manufacturing sector alone from the increase to $15. And there's a lot more here. We'll go into a bit. Yeah, I'll finish it, whatever. Higher minimum wages hurt the government. Raising its own minimum wage costs a state critical tax revenue and constitute unilateral disarmament in its competition with other states. Job losses and business failures from minimum wage hikes reduce state revenue. Meanwhile, much of the benefit of the wage hike to low-income workers who manage to keep jobs at the increased minimum wage is lost due to increased federal taxes and reduced federal earned income tax credits and food stamps, as a writer noted in the Wall Street Journal in 2016. The tax implications of going from a $10 to a $15 an hour minimum wage are fiscally very significant. For a family of four with both spouses making the minimum wage, their federal tax will increase from $4,106 to $7,219. Payroll tax will increase from $2,579 to $3,869. Their earned income tax credit, EITC, will be reduced from $596 to $0. And the $2,400 food stamp credit will be lost. Of the $20,800 increase in income and going from $10 to $15 an hour, $7,778 will be diverted to the government, which doesn't include loss of other income-dependent government welfare programs and added costs. Due to the resulting inflation, over 1/3 of the wage increase will flow to the federal government. The net result is that an economically struggling town with lots of low-wage workers tends to have less disposable income, higher prices, and less consumer purchasing power, meaning fewer retail jobs after a minimum wage hike than before. And this article was by Hans Bader. So I want to also just bring this in here and bring it all together, wrap it all together. It's interesting that at the same time as, it might hurt the government to a certain extent, it hurts the taxpayer a lot, and it also it hurts businesses, it destroys the market, it destroys competition, pushes people out of work, and what does that do? It makes people dependent on government, puts people into debt, puts people into poverty. Then you see all the loan bubble at the same time, 1 million businesses at the same time saying, fourth chance loan, 20th chance loan. This is what's going to happen eventually when government regulates the markets, restricts the markets, taxes people to death, inflates the price of living, and then it comes down on the individuals. This is basic economics as mentioned. So, again, what are we going to do about it? We have to be independent and responsible human beings and stop depending on this horrible monstrosity of statism. This is all just a pattern, piece by piece, a puzzle to bring everyone on their knees begging government for more. If they shove you down a bottomless pit of debt, you are forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, pushing you folks into perfect servitude to them. So what are you doing about it? What are you saying about it? Are you asking for more help from government? Government is organized crime. Taxation is theft. And it all goes in a perpetual circle. Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, repeat. And it all comes back to you, and you all end up paying for it. Inflate the price of living, bring the average price of every good up dramatically. There's a reason among not just the central banking aspect, but government regulations of the markets and everything, legislation. There's a reason why bread was worth a nickel and now it's worth $3. Anyway, thanks for joining us for another report, and we hope you join us next time.
Like what you see here, Wham? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.